There are some disturbing people in the world. The reasons why they decide to act against their fellow man may vary, and sometimes there's no reason at all. Often there's no distinguishing these people from the rest of the public, making them even more dangerous. Number 5. Leigh Matthews was kidnapped in broad daylight outside of her university the day after her 21st birthday. She'd been planning to meet her mother in the university car park to return a credit card Leigh had accidentally picked up that morning. Another university student noticed her talking to a man. This was Donovan Moodley. Moodley was also a student at Bond University, though he didn't know Leigh personally. He'd been attending lectures sporadically and when given tests, wrote nothing. He believed himself to be very intelligent, however, he was in need of money, which was where Leigh came in. He approached Leigh asking for a lift to a nearby intersection, but recognized Moodley as a student and complied. Leigh was the daughter of a businessman, Rob Matthews. They weren't especially rich, only slightly higher in the socioeconomic ladder than Moodley and his family. Both of Leigh's parents were immediately worried when she missed the meeting with her mother, especially when they couldn't get in touch with her via the phone. Later in the day, they finally received a phone call from Leigh's phone. There was a man on the line. He claimed he was Libyan and demanded $300,000 for Leigh's safe return. Another phone call followed and Leigh begged her parents to comply. Rob Matthews sought help from the police and managed to negotiate the sum down to $50,000. Following the kidnapper's instructions, he dropped the money off on the side of a motorway. However, the kidnapper didn't drop Leigh off. There were no further communications from Leigh or her kidnapper, and the Matthews had no information on what was happening to their daughter. What happened next was when Moodley panicked. For the first day of Leigh's disappearance, she was kept in the boot of his car. After he picked up the money, he realized Leigh would be able to identify him if she was released. He made the decision to take Leigh's life and buried her clothes to try to destroy the evidence. Leigh's body was found almost 2 weeks after she vanished. It was clear she hadn't died where she was found, and she showed signs of having been frozen after death. It didn't take police long to identify Moodley as the man behind the crime. A lottery ticket with his fingerprints was found in Leigh's car, and strands of her own hair were found at Moodley's house. Phone records and Moodley's spending also lined up with the movements of the kidnapper. A ring that Leigh had been gifted the day before she went missing was found in his bedroom. Moodley pleaded guilty and was sentenced to life in prison. He later claimed he hadn't worked alone and he had been framed. Number 4. It's a disturbing reality that many medical advances were only made after unethical experiments, often involving people of color or prisoners of war. We may think of these experiments as things of the past, performed by people who are working for the greater good, but this isn't always the case. Dr. Aubry Levin's experiments didn't bring any medical breakthroughs, but did cause psychological and physical pain just a few decades ago. Levin became popular in South Africa in the late 1960s. While still a newly qualified psychiatrist, he claimed to be able to cure homosexuality. He was rapidly promoted to the head of psychiatry in the Southern African Defense Force. While in this role, he led a disturbing policy against homosexual people. It started with using electroconvulsive aversion therapy to try to turn gay soldiers straight. Patients were subjected to extreme pain when showed images of naked men. The theory behind the practice was the subjects would subconsciously associate the homosexual behavior with extreme pain that they'd been put through. Of course, this didn't work, but that didn't stop Levin from extending his so-called treatment to people caught smoking marijuana, and even people who simply didn't want to serve in the military. Anyone who tried to fake being cured was injected with a sort of truth serum and subjected to intense questioning. After thousands of men and some women were subjected to the painful therapy, Levin came to the conclusion that it didn't work. This didn't stop him from trying other methods, though. Test subjects were subjected to chemical castrations and unorthodox sex change operations. It had never been done before in a military hospital, and some patients had botched surgeries. Once the program was shut down, Levin fled to Canada. Many files containing information about the experiments were then destroyed. Levin was accused of human rights abuses, and the doctors he instructed were accused of breaking international laws. Levin claimed all of his subjects were willing, although given these are military conscripts, that doesn't seem to be the case. His crimes continued in Canada. though this time they weren't state-sanctioned and he was convicted for his actions against vulnerable patients in 2010. Number 3. Velma Bullard is one of only 16 women to have received the death penalty in the United States. She's believed to have taken the lives of at least 6 people, including her own mother, 2 husbands, and her fiancé. Bullard married her high school boyfriend, Thomas Burke, at just 17 years old. They had 2 children together and appeared to be happy enough in their marriage. Bullard may have lived an ordinary life had health complications not gotten in the way. Bullard needed an emergency hysterectomy which impacted her mental health, and she became addicted to prescription medications. Her husband started drinking heavily and the couple's marriage rapidly broke down. Bullard and Thomas fought constantly. After one particularly bad fight, Bullard took the children and walked out. When she returned, she found the house had mysteriously caught fire, and Thomas was passed out inside. Thomas died in the fire, and while the death was incredibly suspicious, there was no evidence Bullard was behind the fire. It didn't take long for Bullard to move on. She married a man named Jennings Barfield less than a year after her husband had died. Unfortunately, this marriage wasn't to last either. Shortly after an argument, Jennings suffered a severe heart attack and passed away. Bullard and her children moved in with her mother after her father passed away from lung cancer. Her mother fell ill with stomach issues, though she did recover a few days later. That Christmas, she suffered the same mysterious illness and passed away in the hospital. Bullard began working as a carer, first for an elderly couple and then for a woman with a broken leg. The elderly couple appeared to start suffering from the same illness that had taken her mother's life, passing away within a month of one another. Mrs. Lee, the patient with the broken leg, managed to survive her encounter with Bullard, but her husband wasn't as lucky. John Henry Lee suffered from severe stomach and chest pains, as well as the same symptoms as Bullard's other victims. He passed away due to this mysterious illness. Bullard's criminal activity hadn't gone unnoticed during this time, but it was actually her financial crimes she was worried about. She'd taken out loans in her mother's name and was now forging checks from her boyfriend's account to pay for her prescription medication addiction. Worried her boyfriend would find out, Bullard mixed rat poison into his beer and tea. It didn't take long before it had an effect on him and he passed away in the hospital. Bullard tried to play the role of a mourning girlfriend, but an autopsy found traces of poison in her boyfriend's body. At that point, Bullard's crimes came to light. Even the body of her second husband was exhumed to be examined. Traces of the same poison were found. Bullard confessed to 4 murders and was given the death penalty. Number 2. Jeremy Brutos was an especially disturbing individual who took the lives of 4 women and took parts of their bodies as trophies. Brutos was born in January of 1939 to a mother that wanted a daughter. His mother neglected Brutos, leading to Brutos' resentment of anyone of the opposite gender. He also developed an obsession with women's clothing, particularly shoes. Brutos took the life of his first victim at the start of 1968. He'd been in and out of psychiatric hospitals throughout his childhood and his teenage years. In public, Brutos had settled down and even married in 1961, but his mental health was still significantly damaged. He would suffer from headaches and blackouts, which he relieved with late-night wanderings, often in women's shoes. At the same time, police in the area were tackling an alarming number of missing persons cases. Young women, many students at Oregon State University, had disappeared. Linda Sawson was one of these women. She vanished in January of 1968 and was 19 years old at the time of her disappearance. Linda was last seen while working as a door-to-door saleswoman trying to sell encyclopedias. It was while working that she met Brutos. She knocked on his door and gave her sales pitch. Seeing the opportunity, Brutos invited her inside, faking interest in buying a set of encyclopedias. Once inside, Brutos took Linda's life and threw her body into a river. This would only come out years later after Brutos confessed. Linda's remains were never found. Linda was Brutos' first victim, but it wouldn't be his last, and young women continued to go missing. Police investigating the missing women would get a breakthrough when a fisherman found the body of one of the women floating in a river. It had been tied to a weight with a nylon rope. A second body, similarly tied down with the rope, was found nearby. Brutos would abduct and take the lives of at least 4 young women and attempted to abduct 2 others. The victims who managed to escape were able to give police a description of their attacker. Brutos was eventually identified and arrested after arranging a date with a student who was working with the police. Police found photos of the victims, trophies he'd taken from them, and the rope he'd used when disposing of his victims at his home. He eventually pleaded guilty to all 3 deaths. Number 1. At roughly 6 a.m. on July 15, 1966, Corazon Amora crawled onto the second-story ledge of the townhouse she shared with her fellow student nurses. The rest of the nurses were all dead, killed one by 24-year-old Richard Speck. Speck had a history of violent crime, especially against women. He dropped out of school in his first year of high school and married young, a child following soon after. Speck was violent towards his wife daily, to the point where she was forced to take her child and flee. His wife wasn't his only victim though, and Speck was arrested more than 40 times by the time he turned 24. His crimes included theft, fraud, and assault. It was while on the run for a string of burglaries that Speck committed his first murder. The victim was Mary Catherine Pierce, a 32-year-old barmaid who worked at a tavern Speck frequented. Speck took Mary's life with a punch to the stomach that ruptured her liver and left her body in an empty hog house behind the tavern. It was a few days before anyone would find Mary, in which time Speck stayed in town and acted as if nothing was wrong. He'd been working as a carpenter and had actually helped build the hog house where Mary was found. Police questioned Speck, but he faked an illness and promised to return the following day. Of course, that didn't happen, and Speck fled to his sister in Chicago. Speck started working as a merchant marine and received assistance from the National Maritime Union hiring hall. The hiring hall was down the block from the townhouse where the students had lived. Things would be going well enough for Speck until July 11, 1966. He received the job on a boat, but when he arrived for duty, he found the role had been filled by someone else. He had no job and nowhere to stay. Angry and with very little money, Speck spent the day drinking in a local bar before attacking and robbing a fellow drinker. Taking the gun the woman had been carrying, Speck headed to the nurse's townhouse. Using the gun he stole, Speck forced his way into the nurse's home. He tied them up with torn bedsheets and assured them he only wanted to rob them, but one by one, the young nurses were taken into another room and their lives were taken. Corazon hid under a bed while Speck was out of the room. Thankfully, Speck didn't notice one of the women were missing and left after taking the lives of 8 women. She was able to give police a description of Speck, and before long, the description was on the front page of newspapers. Speck was recognized and he went into a hospital a few days later, and prints linked him to the scene of the crime. He was found guilty in court and handed a death sentence. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to click that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But I've been Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.